A black man is calmly walking to work, dressed in a suit carrying his judge's robe, when a white cop slams him with suspicion. The officer doesn't ask questions. He doesn't believe the ID, because in his eyes, a black man can't possibly be a judge. So right there on the street where he's served for over a decade, the judge is humiliated, handcuffed, arrested, labeled a criminal in front of the very courthouse where he's given others second chances. And when the truth comes out, the town expects everything to go back to normal. But the cop doubles down, fakes a report, buries the footage, and starts a cover-up that threatens to ruin the judge's life forever. What follows isn't just a fight to clear his name, it's a battle for the soul of an entire town. And when the moment of truth finally arrives, what this man chooses to do to the cop who nearly destroyed him shocks everyone. The morning sun painted Cedar Grove's courthouse square in gentle golden light. Judge Marcus Reed Daniels pulled his key from the ignition one more time, but his car remained stubbornly silent. The battery was completely dead. Marcus checked his watch, 7:15. The Veterans Holiday Program started at 8, and he needed to be there early to welcome the participants. He gathered his garment bag containing his judicial robe and picked up his slim leather briefcase. 3 blocks isn't far, he murmured to himself, straightening his tie. The service pin from Desert Storm gleamed on his lapel as he began his walk toward the courthouse. The square was beginning to wake up. Shop owners unlocked their doors, and early risers grabbed coffee from Cedar Grove's only cafe. A few familiar faces nodded hello. Marcus had lived here his whole life, except for his military service years. Officer Ryan Caldwell was parked in his patrol car near the courthouse steps, watching the morning traffic with hard, watchful eyes. His attention snapped to Marcus as soon as the judge came into view. Something in his expression shifted from bored to suspicious. The patrol car's door opened with a sharp creak. Caldwell stepped out, positioning himself directly in Marcus's path. "Hold it right there," Caldwell commanded, his voice carrying across the E square. "What's in the bag?" Marcus kept his voice steady and polite. "Good morning, officer. This is my judicial robe. I'm heading to the courthouse for—" "Your judicial robe?" Caldwell's tone dripped with disbelief. "Let me see some ID." Several people had stopped to watch. Marcus carefully set down his briefcase and reached for his wallet, maintaining eye contact with Caldwell. "Of course. I'm Judge Marcus Reed Daniels. I can call the clerk's office if you'd like to verify." "A judge?" Caldwell snorted. "Right, and I'm the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court." He snatched the courthouse ID from Marcus's hand, studying it with obvious skepticism. "This has to be fake," Caldwell declared. "Where did you get this?" Marcus felt the familiar weight of having to prove himself, the same weight he'd carried through law school, through his military service, through his entire career. He kept his voice calm. "Officer, I've served on the bench here for 12 years. If you'll just—" "Put your hands where I can see them," Caldwell interrupted, his hand moving to his belt. Now, more people were gathering. Someone whispered, "That's Judge Daniels," but Caldwell either didn't hear or chose to ignore it. "Officer," Marcus tried one more time, "this is unnecessary. I'm simply walking to work." "I said hands up." Caldwell grabbed Marcus's wrist, twisting it behind his back. The garment bag fell to the sidewalk as cold metal handcuffs clicked into place. Marcus didn't resist. Years of experience had taught him that staying calm was his only option, even as his dignity was being stripped away in front of his own courthouse. He could feel the stares of the growing crowd, hear the murmurs of shock. "You're under arrest for impersonating a judicial officer," Caldwell announced loudly, "and suspicious behavior." "What suspicious behavior?" Marcus asked quietly. "Being too calm," Caldwell snapped. "Real criminals always act nervous. You're trying too hard to look innocent." From the corner of his eye, Marcus spotted someone holding up a phone, recording. Part of him felt grateful for that witness, while another part ached that such evidence might be necessary. Caldwell roughly patted him down, then grabbed the fallen garment bag and briefcase. "We'll see what other fake items you're carrying." The courthouse clock began to chime the half-hour as Caldwell pushed Marcus toward the patrol car. 7:30. In 30 minutes, he was supposed to be welcoming veterans to a program about second chances and dignity. Instead, he was being forced into the back seat of a police car, watching his courthouse grow smaller through the window as Caldwell hit the siren and pulled away. From the square, Marcus closed his eyes briefly, centering himself with a silent prayer. The handcuffs bit into his wrists, but it was the weight of public humiliation that pressed heaviest on his shoulders. Through the window, he watched the clock tower of his courthouse drift away as the siren wailed, announcing his shame to the whole town. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus stood at the booking desk, his wrists still bound behind him. The metal cuffs bit into his skin, but he kept his voice steady. "Call the courthouse," he repeated for the third time. "Just call the courthouse." Officer Caldwell ignored him, scratching away at paperwork with deliberate slowness. A smirk played at the corner of his mouth as he filled in boxes on the form. "Sure thing, Your Honor," Caldwell said, making the title sound like a joke. "Right after we get your prints." The booking officer pressed Marcus's fingers into the ink pad one by one. Black smudges marked his skin, a stark reminder of this humiliation. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, centering himself with the same breathing exercises he'd used in Desert Storm. The station door swung open. Chief Elaine Porter strode in, her practical heels clicking against the linoleum. She stopped dead when she saw Marcus, her face draining of color. "Judge Daniels?" Her voice cracked, slightly. "What in God's name—" "Chief Porter," Marcus said quietly. "Would you please call the courthouse?" She was already pulling out her phone. Within minutes, the clerk's panicked voice confirmed what Marcus had been saying all along. Chief Porter's lips pressed into a thin line as she turned to Caldwell. "Remove those cuffs. Now." The metal released with a click. Marcus brought his hands forward slowly, rubbing his wrists where red marks had formed. His courthouse ID and belongings were returned in a clear plastic bag, along with his garment bag containing the judicial robe. "Judge Daniels, Chief Porter started, her words coming out stiff and formal. "This was clearly a misunderstanding. We apologize for any inconvenience." The word inconvenience hung in the air like smoke. Marcus simply nodded, his face a careful mask. "Will that be all?" he asked. "Yes, sir. You're free to go." Marcus walked out of the station with measured steps, his back straight. Only when he was in his car, brought by a junior officer who'd been sent to fetch it, did he allow his hands to shake on the steering wheel. The drive home was a blur. When he pulled into his driveway, Tasha was already waiting on the porch. His daughter's eyes were red-rimmed as she ran to meet him. "Daddy!" She wrapped her arms around him tight. "The courthouse called me. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby." He hugged her back, drawing strength from her presence. "Just a rough morning." "Rough morning?" Tasha pulled back, her voice rising. "They arrested you for being a judge while black." "Hush now," he said gently. "Let's go inside." They had barely settled in the living room when the doorbell rang. Miss Evelyn Harper stood there, holding a covered casserole dish. The retired schoolteacher's silver hair was neatly pinned back, and her kind eyes held both worry and determination. "The prayer chain is already moving," she said, stepping inside. "The whole congregation knows, and we're standing with you, Marcus. Miss Evelyn, you didn't have to." "Hush yourself. My chicken casserole won't fix what happened, but you need to eat." She set the dish down firmly. "And you need to know you're not alone." Marcus's phone buzzed. Caroline Vance, the attorney who'd helped with his veterans advocacy program. His stomach tightened as he answered. "Marcus," Caroline's voice was taut with concern. "Have you seen Caldwell's report?" "What report?" "He's already filed it. Claims you resisted arrest and made threatening statements." She paused. "It's spreading on Facebook. People are sharing it like it's gospel truth." Marcus sank into his armchair. Tasha knelt beside him, gripping his hand. "That's a lie," he said quietly. "You know that's a lie." "Of course I know, but he's trying to cover himself by attacking you." Marcus's computer chimed with a new email. He opened it one-handed, still holding the phone. The subject line made his chest tight. "Formal complaint. Hearing notice." The court administrator's message was brief, but devastating. Based on Officer Caldwell's report, a formal complaint had been filed against him. Hearing would be scheduled to review his fitness to remain on the bench. Marcus stared at the screen, the words blurring slightly. Everything he'd worked for, his reputation, his position, his ability to help others, was suddenly at risk because one officer couldn't accept the truth of who he was. Miss Evelyn's hand settled on his shoulder. "The truth will stand, Marcus," she said softly, "no matter how many lies they pile on top of it. But as..." Marcus looked at the email again. He wondered if the truth would be enough this time. The system that was supposed to dispense justice was being turned against him, twisted by the very people meant to protect it. He glanced at his judicial robe, still in its garment bag by the door. The simple black fabric represented everything he believed in: fairness, dignity, the power of law to protect rather than punish. Now that same system was being used as a weapon against him. Marcus sat at his dining room table, staring at the untouched glass of water before him. The house lights were dim, making the glow from Tasha's phone screen seem harsh in comparison. His daughter's fingers moved quickly across the surface, her face growing darker with each scroll. "Daddy, these people—" Tasha's voice cracked. "They're saying such awful things, making up stories about what happened." "Don't read those comments, baby." Marcus's voice was steady, though his hands weren't. "Nothing good comes from that." A gentle knock at the door made them both jump. Miss Evelyn Harper stood on the porch, her silver hair neat despite the late hour, holding a covered casserole dish. The smell of her famous chicken and dumplings filled the room as she set it down. "The church ladies got busy as soon as we heard," she said, her kind eyes taking in Marcus's tired face. "Now, before we do anything else, we're going to pray." She reached for their hands and they bowed their heads. "Lord, wrap your arms around this family. Protect them from those who would harm them with words or deeds. Give them strength to stand in their truth. Amen." Marcus squeezed her hand before letting go. "Miss Evelyn, I've faced rough things before, but today—" He paused, searching for words. "It wasn't the handcuffs that hurt. Most, it was being treated like I was pretending to be human. Like I couldn't possibly be who I am." Miss Evelyn patted his shoulder. "Child, I taught third grade for 40 years. I've seen that look too many times on too many faces. But you're not alone in this fight." The sky was just beginning to lighten when Caroline Vance arrived, her heels clicking purposefully on the front walk. She carried a leather briefcase and a digital camera, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she sat down at the table. "Show me your wrists," she said without preamble. Marcus rolled up his sleeves, revealing the reddened marks where the handcuffs had been. Caroline photographed them from multiple angles, her movements precise and professional. "We need to document everything," she explained, setting up her laptop. "The bruising, the timeline, every word Officer Caldwell said to you. A false report is dangerous. It can take on a life of its own if we don't attack it quickly with facts." Tasha pushed her phone across the table. "People are already sharing the video online." Caroline glanced at it. "Yes, I've seen it, but everyone's arguing about what it means instead of what it shows. That's why we need your statement, Marcus. Every detail you can remember, while it's fresh." Marcus rubbed his temples. "I don't want revenge. Caroline, I just want the truth on record. I want people to know what really happened." "Then let's start writing it down." Caroline opened a new document. "What time did you discover your car wouldn't start?" For the next hour, they reconstructed the morning minute by minute. The dead battery at 7:15, the decision to walk at 7:25, the exact words Caldwell had used when he stopped Marcus on the sidewalk. Miss Evelyn made fresh coffee while they worked, her quiet presence a comfort as Marcus relived each moment. The sun rose fully, streaming through the windows and catching the dust motes in its beams. When they finished, Marcus stood slowly. He walked to his bedroom and opened the closet door. With careful movements, he lifted his judge's robe from where he'd dropped it the night before. He shook out the wrinkles, smoothed the fabric, and hung it properly on its hanger. Returning to the dining room, he met Caroline's eyes. "We tell the truth," he said firmly, "and we do it the right way." Caroline nodded, gathering her papers. "That's exactly what we're going to do." Miss Evelyn smiled, a fierce pride in her eyes. "Truth doesn't need shouting," she said softly. "It just needs steady voices to speak it." The morning light filled the room completely now, and Marcus straightened his shoulders. The weight of yesterday still pressed on him, but he could bear it. He would bear it, and he would face what came next with the same dignity he'd always carried. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Marcus slipped through the side entrance, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. The familiar scent of coffee drifted from Judge William Morton's office, but today it carried a heaviness that made his stomach twist. Inside, Judge Morton and Sarah Fields, the court administrator, sat with their hands wrapped around steaming mugs. The morning paper lay face down on the desk between them. "Marcus," Judge Morton said, standing. His lined face showed every bit of his 70 years. "Please, sit." The leather chair creaked as Marcus settled into it. Sarah wouldn't meet his eyes, instead studying the rim of her coffee cup, as if it held answers. "We believe you," Judge Morton began, his voice gentle. "That's not in question. But the headlines," he gestured at the turned-over newspaper. Sarah cleared her throat. "The county commissioners are concerned about public confidence. And the calendar." She trailed off, fingers tapping nervously on her mug. "You want me to step back," Marcus said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Temporarily," Judge Morton added quickly. "Just until this clears up. Paid leave, of course." Marcus felt the weight of 30 years on the bench pressing down on his shoulders. He thought of the veterans program he was supposed to lead next week, the young faces waiting for someone who looked like them, wearing the robe. "I understand," he said, though the words tasted bitter. "The court comes first." Across town, Caroline Vance's heels clicked purposefully down the police station hallway. Chief Porter's office door stood open, but Caroline knocked anyway. "Come in," Porter called, looking up from a stack of papers. "Ms. Vance." "Chief." Caroline sat without waiting for an invitation. "Let's talk about what happens next." Porter's desk was neat, everything in its place. A photo of her kids faced away from visitors. "The department takes these matters seriously," she began. "I'm sure you do," Caroline interrupted smoothly. "That's why I need the body cam footage." Porter's pause was a fraction too long. "It's being processed." "Processed?" Caroline kept her tone light. "That's an interesting word for copy and paste. There are procedures, and I know them all," Caroline said. "I also need the dispatch logs and Officer Caldwell's complete report today. The union has concerns. The union isn't above the law." Caroline placed her business card on the desk. "I'll wait." Walking back to her car, Caroline spotted Marcus standing near his usual parking spot. He was staring across the lot, where Officer Caldwell lounged against a patrol car, sharing a joke with another officer. Their laughter carried across the pavement like a slap. Marcus's face remained carefully blank, but his hands had tightened into fists at his sides. 30 years of earned respect stripped away by one man's prejudice, and now that man stood laughing, as if he hadn't just tried to destroy a life. Caroline's phone buzzed. The courthouse number flashed on the screen. "Caroline, it's David from the DA's office." The voice was low, urgent. "You need to know. They're pushing the suspicious behavior angle hard. The prosecutor's already repeating Caldwell's version in meetings." "Without seeing the body cam?" Caroline asked sharply. "That's just it. No one's seen it. But they're running with his story anyway. The whole town's starting to believe it." Caroline watched Marcus walk to his car, shoulders straight despite everything. She thought of the missing footage, the convenient delays, the whispered accusations spreading like poison through their small town. "Thank you, David," she said quietly. "Keep me posted." She ended the call and stared at the phone, knowing the real fight was just beginning. The truth wasn't just in the missing body cam footage now. It was trapped in a web of power, prejudice, and small-town politics that would take more than facts to untangle. The afternoon sun beat down on the town square as Caroline's sedan pulled up to the curb. Marcus stepped out, his legs heavy with the weight of retracing yesterday's humiliation. The small grocery store stood exactly as it had before, a modest brick building with faded awnings and a bell that chimed when they entered. Inside, the cool air and smell of fresh bread hit them. Behind the counter, Kayla Benton fidgeted with her name tag, her ponytail swinging as she looked up. Recognition flickered in her eyes when she saw Marcus. "Miss Benton," Caroline said warmly. "I'm Caroline Vance, Judge Daniel's attorney. Could we talk for a few minutes?" Kayla glanced around the empty store. I guess so. My break's in 10 minutes." They waited, browsing the aisles while Kayla helped an elderly woman with her coupons. When her replacement arrived, she led them to a small break room with a wobbly table and vending machine. "I saw everything," Kayla said quietly, twisting her hands in her lap. "Judge Daniels was so polite, even when Officer Caldwell started yelling. He showed his ID right away. I could see the courthouse picture from here. He kept asking for a supervisor, real calm-like." Marcus nodded slowly. "Did you hear what Officer Caldwell said to me?" He kept saying no black man could be a judge here. Said you must have stolen the ID or made it fake. Kayla's voice shook. It wasn't right, what he did. Caroline leaned forward. The store has security cameras outside, doesn't it? Yes, ma'am. One points right at that sidewalk. Kayla brightened. It would show everything. Could we get a copy of that footage? The bell chimed again. Through the break room's small window they saw Officer Nate Bowers saunter in, his uniform crisp and his eyes cold. He grabbed a soda from the cooler, then leaned against the counter, staring directly at the break room door. Kayla's face drained of color. I don't know about the cameras. I'd have to ask my manager. That's okay, Caroline said gently, sliding her business card across the table. Here's my number if you want to talk more. They left through the back door, Bowers' eyes following them the whole way. Outside, Caroline's phone buzzed, a text from the gas station owner across the street confirming their cameras might have caught the incident too. Marcus watched Kayla through the window, now being cornered by Bowers. She's scared. But she saw the truth, Caroline said. That matters. They drove home in silence. Tasha met them at the door, her phone clutched tight. Daddy, Mrs. Peterson next. Dawn just messaged me. She's asking why you're lying about Officer Caldwell. Says he's such a good man, always helps her with her groceries. Marcus sank into his chair, the leather creaking under him. The lie travels faster than truth these days. The phone rang at 8 that evening. Caroline put it on speaker and Kayla's trembling voice filled the room. I'm sorry, she sobbed. Someone came by, said I should stay out of it if I know what's good for me. Said nobody would believe me anyway. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what this was becoming. Not just an arrest anymore. Not just a mistake. Something darker, spreading like ink through his town's quiet streets. It's okay, Kayla, he said softly. You don't have to put yourself at risk. After they hung up, Caroline stared at her legal pad, now filled with notes. They're trying to bury this, Marcus. Turn it into your word against his. Marcus touched his judge's pin, still on his lapel. Then we'll dig deeper. Truth doesn't stay buried forever. The setting sun painted long shadows across his living room floor. Somewhere out there, a young clerk was crying because she'd seen wrong done and couldn't speak up. Somewhere his neighbors were choosing what to believe, and in between, the truth waited to be found. The morning sun filtered through stained glass, windows, casting gentle colors across the wooden pews of First Community Church. Marcus Daniels sat in his usual spot, first pew on the right, but today the familiar comfort of Sunday service felt different. Behind him, whispers rustled like autumn leaves through the lobby. Miss Evelyn Harper, her silver hair neatly pinned and wearing her best floral dress, made her way to Pastor Green just before the service began. Her whispered conversation ended with a gentle nod from the pastor. Before we begin today's message, Pastor Green said, adjusting his microphone, Miss Evelyn has requested a moment for testimony from our brother Marcus. The congregation shifted. Some leaned forward, others looked down at their hymnals. Marcus stood slowly, straightening his tie, not his usual Sunday best, but still dignified. He turned to face his church family, people who'd known him for decades. I stand before you today, Marcus began, his voice soft but clear as a bell. Not as a judge, but as your brother in Christ. This week I was arrested on our town square. He paused, letting the reality sink in. I was arrested because a man in uniform would not believe that a black man in a suit, carrying his judge's robe, could possibly be telling the truth about who he was. A few gasps broke the silence. Mrs. Johnson, who'd taught third grade for 40 years, pressed a tissue to her eyes. I'm not here asking for anger, Marcus continued. I'm asking for prayers. Prayers for justice to prevail. And yes, he took a deep breath, prayers for Officer Caldwell's heart to change, because hate hurts the hater as much as the hated. The silence that followed felt holy. Then, without a word, Mother Washington, 92 years old and sharp as ever, rose from her seat. She walked with her cane to where Tasha sat behind her father and placed a wrinkled hand on the young woman's shoulder. Miss Evelyn followed, then Mrs. Johnson, then others. Soon, a circle of women surrounded both Marcus and Tasha, hands gentle on their shoulders and backs. We are your shield, Mother Washington said simply. God's love made visible. After the service, the fellowship hall buzzed with activity. Church members arrived with covered dishes. Sister Mary's famous mac and cheese, Brother Jim's smoked brisket, 3 different kinds of sweet potato pie. But more than food, they brought promises. "I've got a minivan," said Deacon Phillips. "You need rides anywhere, day or night, you call me." "My grandson's good with computers," Mrs. Torres offered. "He said something about helping track down security footage." Miss Evelyn organized it all with quiet efficiency, making lists of who could attend the hearing, who could provide childcare for families attending, who could help with meals. The afternoon faded into evening, and across town the mood shifted dramatically. The town council building's parking lot filled with pickup trucks and police cruisers. Officer Ryan Caldwell stood on the steps, surrounded by a small but vocal group of supporters. "I was just doing my job," Caldwell's voice carried across the lot, following procedure. "Now they're trying to make me look like the bad guy." Inside her office, Caroline Vance was working late, reviewing security camera angles from businesses near the arrest site, when her phone buzzed. The prosecutor's number flashed on screen. She pressed play on the voicemail. "Ms. Vance, this is D.A. Thompson. In light of new evidence regarding the Daniels incident, we're upgrading the charges. Expect formal notification tomorrow. Court date to follow." Caroline set the phone down carefully, its screen reflecting the setting sun through her window. The system was pushing back, hard. But looking at the stack of witness statements on her desk, statements from church members, from shopkeepers, from veterans who'd appeared in Marcus's courtroom, she knew they weren't fighting alone. At home, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, the remains of 3 different casseroles spread before him. Tasha heated another cup of coffee, though the hour was late. "Daddy," she said softly, "Mother Washington called. She said to tell you the prayer chain is active. 24 hours, round the clock." Marcus nodded, touched by the simple power of it. Even as the legal battle intensified, even as Caldwell's lies spread, there were people staying awake to pray. Sometimes, he thought, that was the most revolutionary act of all, to meet hatred with steady love, to answer lies with quiet truth. The kitchen clock ticked steadily. Outside, crickets sang their evening song, and somewhere in the dark, grandmothers and teachers, deacons and nurses were lifting his name to heaven, believing justice would come. The morning sun streamed through Marcus's kitchen windows, casting long shadows across stacks of papers spread over his wooden table. Caroline's legal pad was filled with neat notes, while beside her, Hal Price moved with the careful precision of someone who'd spent decades handling important documents. "Something's not adding up here," Hal said, tapping a weathered finger on the dispatch log. His voice carried the quiet authority of his Marine Corps years. He adjusted his reading glasses and leaned closer to the paper. Caroline looked up from her own stack. "What do you see, Hal?" "According to this log, Caldwell's body cam was activated at 9:15 that morning." Hal's finger traced down the column. "But look here, no cloud upload entry. That's not procedure." Marcus stood at the counter, pouring fresh coffee into 3 mugs. "Is that unusual?" "Very," Hal replied, accepting a mug with a nod of thanks. "I've been volunteering at the VFW long enough to know how these systems work. Every activation generates an automatic upload. No exceptions." Caroline made a note, her pen scratching against paper. "That's exactly the kind of detail we need. I'll head to the station again, see what they say about this gap." "They'll stonewall you," Hal predicted, but his eyes held a determined glint. "While you do that, I'll check those security cameras near the square. That gas station had a good view of the street." Marcus sank into a chair, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug. "I appreciate both of you doing this. The truth shouldn't be this hard to prove." "That's exactly why we're doing it," Caroline said firmly. "The truth matters." They split up, each with their mission. Caroline headed to the police station, her heels clicking purposefully down sterile hallways to the evidence room. The same clerk from before gave her the same answer. "Still processing." His eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. Meanwhile, Hal parked his old pickup truck at the gas station. The manager, Dave Wheeler, recognized him immediately. Hal had been buying his coffee there every morning for 20 years. "I remember that morning," Dave said, leaning against the counter. "Heard the commotion, saw the crowd gathering. Didn't seem right what I saw." "We need to know if your cameras caught any of it," Hal said. Dave nodded slowly. "We keep everything for 30 days, but it's stored. Off-site now, I can make some calls." Back at the house, Marcus's phone buzzed with messages. "Judge Thompson, keeping you in my prayers. This isn't right." Another from the court administrator. "People are talking. Be careful." A third from a law clerk. "Sir, they're trying to make you look unstable." Marcus set the phone face down, letting out a long breath. The walls of his home felt both like a sanctuary and a cage. When Hal returned that afternoon, there was a subtle energy in his movements. He'd served long enough to know when he had valuable intel. "Dave came through," he said, settling back at the table. "Their backup service keeps everything. He's getting us access." Caroline had spread out a fresh timeline on the table, each event carefully noted with timestamps and source documentation. "This is perfect timing. We're building something they can't ignore." Hal pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and set it in the middle of the table. "Dave sent me this preview clip. It's just 30 seconds, but—" They leaned in close as the video played. The quality wasn't perfect, but it was clear enough. There was Marcus, hands visible, voice steady even from a distance. "Officer, I'm happy to call the courthouse right now to verify." Caroline's breath caught. "You can see his ID in his hand," she whispered. "You can. Hear how calm he is. This can turn the tide." The clip ended, and the kitchen fell silent, except for the soft ticking of the wall clock. In that moment, they all felt the weight of what they'd found, a small piece of truth that had refused to stay buried. Hal carefully collected the dispatch logs, sliding them into a folder. "Truths like that sometimes," he said quietly. "Comes out in pieces, but it always comes out." Caroline was already making notes, her legal mind spinning with possibilities. "With this and the dispatch log discrepancy, we can force them to explain what happened to the body cam footage. They'll have to answer for it in court." Marcus touched the edge of the video, still frozen on Hal's phone screen. There he was, standing dignified even as his world was about to turn upside down. "I just wanted to walk to work that morning," he said softly. "Just wanted to do my job." "And you will again," Hal said with the quiet certainty of a man who'd seen justice prevail before. "We've got proof now, real proof." The morning sun filtered through Marcus's kitchen windows as Caroline leaned forward, clicking play on her laptop. The recovered security footage, though grainy, filled the screen. Tasha gripped her father's arm as they watched. "Look," Caroline said, pointing. "You can clearly see your hands are open, Judge, and the audio—" The clip's sound was tinny but distinct. Marcus's voice came through steady and professional. "Officer, I'm happy to call the courthouse clerk or wait for a supervisor." Caldwell's response crackled with hostility. "Stop resisting. A real judge wouldn't be walking around like this." Tasha wiped tears from her eyes. "Daddy, this proves everything. They can't ignore this." Marcus squeezed his daughter's hand but kept his expression measured. After 30 years on the bench, he knew better than to celebrate too early. Caroline spread her legal pad on the kitchen table, already covered with Hal's carefully organized timeline. The gas station footage matches the exact timestamps from the dispatch log. And look here, she pulled out her phone, showing photos of the purple marks on Marcus's wrists. "The bruising pattern supports your account of being cuffed, while completely cooperative." Hal, who'd been quietly sipping coffee by the window, cleared his throat. "And I've got those system logs showing Caldwell's body cam was definitely running. Funny how that footage disappeared, isn't it?" "We'll file the motion to dismiss this morning," Caroline said, gathering her papers. Between the video, Kayla's statement about what she witnessed, and Hal's technical evidence, they can't keep pretending this was legitimate. An hour later, Marcus walked through the courthouse's familiar marble hallway. The building felt different now. Every echo of his footsteps carried the weight of what had happened. But something else was different too. Sandra at the clerk's desk gave him a warm smile. "Good morning, Judge Daniels." Two lawyers paused their conversation to nod respectfully. A young intern whispered, "We're praying for you, sir." Outside the senior judge's chamber, old Bill Thompson, who'd been a bailiff longer than Marcus had been alive, touched his shoulder. "Hold your head up, sir. We know who you are." For the first time since the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, Marcus felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. The truth was getting through. People were remembering who he really was, not Caldwell's twisted story, but 30 years of fairness from the bench. His meeting with Judge Henderson was brief but supportive. "We want you back here where you belong, Marcus. This nonsense has gone on long enough." Back in her office, Caroline dialed the prosecutor's number, ready to present their evidence and request an immediate dismissal. Her confident smile faded as she listened. "Yes, I understand chain of custody, but—" She pressed her lips together. The gas station footage is authenticated by... The call ended abruptly. Caroline stared at her phone, then jumped when it buzzed with a new email. Her face darkened as she read. They're trying to block the video evidence. Filing a motion to suppress based on chain of custody concerns. What does that mean? Tasha asked from the porch swing where she and Marcus sat waiting. Caroline stood in the doorway, reading aloud from her phone. The prosecution moves to exclude any surveillance footage not properly collected and maintained by law enforcement, citing concerns about tampering and authentication. They know it's real, Hal muttered from his seat on the porch steps. They're just buying time. Marcus watched the autumn leaves skittering across his front yard, each one carried by winds he couldn't control. The pre-hearing date, originally set for Friday, would now be pushed back while they argued about the video. "How long?" he asked quietly. Caroline's silence said enough. More days of whispers, more nights of worry, more time for lies to spread, while truth sat waiting in a digital file, trapped in legal limbo. Tasha's fingers tightened around her father's hand. "We can handle more waiting, Daddy. We're not giving up." Marcus nodded, but his eyes stayed on those scattered leaves. He'd spent his entire career believing justice might move slowly, but it would always arrive if you followed the right path. Now he was learning just how many roadblocks could be thrown across that path when someone wanted to hide the truth. The late morning sun cast their shadows long across the porch boards, copies of themselves stretched and distorted, like the twisted version of reality Caldwell had created with his lies. But shadows always faded when enough light shined. Marcus just hadn't expected it would be such a fight to let that light through. The porch light cast long shadows across the welcome mat as Tasha bent to retrieve the mail. Her fingers brushed against something that wasn't an envelope, a folded piece of paper tucked underneath. She opened it, and 3 words in rough black marker made her stomach clench. "Drop it or else." Her hands trembled as she hurried inside. "Daddy?" Marcus looked up from his Bible, reading glasses perched on his nose. The moment he saw her face, he set the book aside. "What is it, baby?" She held out the note and Marcus took it carefully, as if it might bite. His jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "It's going to be all right." "How can you say that?" Tasha paced the living room, her mother's antique lamp casting warm light that couldn't touch the cold fear in her chest. "They know where we live. They're threatening us." "Call Caroline," Marcus said, already reaching for his phone to photograph the note. Within minutes, Caroline's voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm calling Chief Porter right now. Document everything. Time you found it, exact location. And Marcus, nobody stays alone tonight." Tasha made up the guest room, insisting on sleeping downstairs near her father. Every passing car made them both tense, shadows becoming monsters in the dark. Marcus lay awake, listening to his daughter's restless, turning on the fold-out couch, wishing he could shield her from this darkness like he did when she was small. Dawn found him exhausted, but dressed, walking the 3 blocks to Resurrection Baptist Church. The morning air was crisp, leaves crunching under his dress shoes. Pastor Michael Green was already in his office, reading glasses glinting in early light. "I knew you'd come by," the pastor said, gesturing to a worn leather chair. Marcus sank into it, shoulders heavy. "I'm angry, Michael. The kind of angry that burns." "Good." Pastor Green's response was unexpected. "That means you're human. But a judge can't be—" "Stop right there." The pastor leaned forward. "You're not on the bench right now. You're a man being wronged. Faith doesn't mean pretending it doesn't hurt. It means choosing what you do with the hurt." Marcus rubbed his temples. "I keep thinking about my daddy. How many times he swallowed his pride just to keep us safe. I thought we were past that. Your daddy survived so you could thrive," Pastor Green said softly. "And you're fighting now so others won't face this tomorrow. That's not weakness. That's legacy." Back home, Marcus tried to rest, but his phone buzzed constantly. "Judge Henderson, the media's asking questions." A colleague. "Maybe if you just apologized." A number he didn't recognize. "You're ruining a good officer's career." Tasha watched him from the kitchen, worry creasing her forehead. "Daddy, you need to eat something." But food tasted like ash. The room seemed to tilt sideways, and Marcus blinked hard, trying to focus on the family photos on the wall. His chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. "Daddy?" Tasha's voice seemed far away. "Your face is gray?" He tried to stand, but the room spun. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. "I just need to... I'm calling 911. Tasha was already dialing, her voice sharp with fear. "He's having trouble breathing. Yes, 58 years old." Marcus wanted to tell her not to worry, but his tongue felt thick. Through the growing fog, he heard the familiar wail of sirens, just like last week, but this time they were coming for him. The paramedics moved efficiently, their voices professional and calm. Blood pressure cuff, oxygen monitor, quick questions. Marcus focused on breathing, on staying present for Tasha, who clutched his hand like she was 7 years old again. "BP is 190/110, a medic called out. "We need to transport." As they lifted him onto the stretcher, Marcus caught fragments of radio chatter and worried voices. Someone said, "dangerously high," and "cardiac risk," and Tasha's soft crying followed him into the ambulance. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was Miss Evelyn Harper hurrying across the lawn, already reaching to fold Tasha into a hug. Even now, in the midst of sirens and fear, God sent angels wearing sensible shoes and carrying casserole dishes, ready to hold his baby girl while he couldn't. The ambulance rocked gently as it pulled away, and Marcus closed his eyes. The same courthouse clock tower that had drifted past his window during the arrest now slid by again, its face catching the last light of day. But this time, the sirens weren't carrying him toward injustice. They were racing him toward help, proof that sometimes flashing lights could mean safety instead of threat. His chest still felt tight, but he forced himself to take slow breaths, the way he'd learned in the army. Whatever came next, he had to stay strong. Not just for Tasha, but for every person watching to see if truth could still stand up to power, even when power fought back with unsigned threats and midnight shadows. The medic adjusted his oxygen mask. "Blood pressure's still elevated, but we're getting you help, sir. Just hold on." The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the quiet hospital room as Marcus opened his eyes. Morning light filtered through thin curtains, casting a soft glow on Tasha's sleeping form. She was curled uncomfortably in the visitor's chair, her hand still wrapped protectively around his, just as it had been when exhaustion finally claimed her the night before. "How are you feeling, Judge Daniels?" Dr. Sarah Chen's voice was gentle but firm as she entered, checking his vitals with practiced efficiency. "Better," Marcus said, though the tightness in his chest hadn't fully subsided. Dr. Chen shook her head. "Your blood pressure is still higher than I'd like. This level of stress could cause serious damage." She adjusted his IV line. "You need to slow down. Take time to heal." "I can't just..." Marcus started. "You can, and you will," Dr. Chen interrupted. "At least for a few days. Doctor's orders." Tasha stirred, blinking awake. The worry lines around her eyes had deepened over the past week. "Dad?" Her voice was small, like when she was a child waking from a bad dream. "I'm okay, baby girl," Marcus assured her, squeezing her hand. A soft knock at the door announced Miss Evelyn Harper's arrival. The retired teacher carried a thermos of homemade soup and her old leather Bible, its pages worn soft from decades of daily reading. "Brought you some strength for your body and your spirit," she said, setting down her offerings. She opened the Bible to a marked page, her fingers tracing the familiar words. "But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint." Miss Evelyn closed the Bible and fixed Marcus with a knowing look. "Your life matters more than pride, Marcus, but your truth matters more than their comfort." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll rest," he promised, "but I won't quit." "Good," Miss Evelyn patted his hand. "That's the man I know." Later that afternoon, Miss Evelyn sorted canned goods at the church food pantry, humming old hymns under her breath. The door creaked open, and she looked up to see Martha Caldwell, Officer Caldwell's mother, standing hesitantly in the doorway. Martha's shoulders were hunched, her face drawn with worry and shame. She'd been missing from Sunday services lately. The two women's eyes met across the stack of food boxes. Miss Evelyn could have said many things, could have let loose the anger she felt at what Martha's son had done. Instead, she simply said, "I'm praying for your son to choose right, Martha." Martha's eyes welled with tears. She nodded once, then turned and hurried away. Word traveled fast in small towns. By evening, Ryan Caldwell sat alone in his patrol car, parked in the empty lot behind the station. The conversation between his mother and Miss Evelyn had reached him, settling like a stone in his stomach. He stared at his hands on the steering wheel, remembering how they'd fastened those handcuffs. Marcus Daniels's voice echoed in his memory, steady, dignified, asking calmly for a supervisor. No threats, no resistance, just dignity that Caldwell had refused to see. His phone buzzed, a message from Bowers about staying strong and having his back. Caldwell's fingers hovered over the keypad, starting to type a response, but the words wouldn't come. His hands began to shake. He deleted the half-written message, his jaw clenching tight as the certainty he'd been clinging to began to crack like thin ice. The courthouse stood quiet in the early morning light, its brick walls holding decades of justice and injustice alike. Inside, the marble hallway filled with whispers as people gathered for the delayed pre-hearing. The wooden benches creaked under the weight of spectators, their eyes following every movement. Marcus Daniels walked slowly through the heavy doors, his steps measured after his hospital stay. Tasha held his arm, her touch gentle but fierce with protection. Caroline walked beside them, briefcase ready, her courthouse heels clicking against the floor with determination. In the third row, Hal Price sat ramrod straight, his Marine bearing unchanged by age. His weathered hands rested on his cane, and his eyes tracked everyone who entered, especially those in uniform. The hearing room felt too warm, despite the autumn chill outside. Caroline arranged her papers with careful precision, the partial video clip ready on her laptop. Marcus watched the clock tick forward, each minute stretching like taffy. When Kayla Benton's name was called, she rose from her seat near the back. Her work apron was gone, replaced by a simple blouse that couldn't hide her trembling hands. She walked to the front like someone crossing thin ice, each step careful and uncertain. "Please state your name for the record," Caroline said gently. "Kayla Benton." Her voice came out barely louder than a whisper. "And where do you work, Miss Benton?" "Walker's Grocery on Cedar Street." Kayla's fingers twisted together in her lap. "Were you working last Thursday morning?" "Yes, ma'am." "Can you tell us what you saw that morning?" Kayla glanced at Marcus, then quickly away. I was stocking shelves near the front window. Judge Daniels was outside on the sidewalk. Did you see him interact with Officer Caldwell?" "Yes." Kayla swallowed hard. "Judge Daniels showed his ID. I could see it clearly from where I was standing. He was very polite, kept asking to call someone at the courthouse." The room held its breath. Caroline clicked play on the recovered video clip. The grainy footage showed exactly what Kayla described. Marcus, calm and dignified, holding out his identification. "Is this what you witnessed?" Caroline asked. "Yes, that's what—" Kayla's voice cracked as movement caught her eye. In the back row, Officer Nate Bowers shifted in his chair, his uniform stark against the wooden bench. His stare bore into Kayla like a physical weight. The prosecutor stood, straightening his tie. "Miss Benton, isn't it possible you were mistaken about what you saw?" Kayla's eyes darted between Bowers and her hands. "You were stocking shelves, after all, moving around. Perhaps you didn't see everything clearly." "I thought—" Kayla's voice grew smaller. "Maybe I don't remember exactly anymore." Marcus felt his daughter's hand tighten on his arm. The old familiar weight settled in his chest, that heavy knowledge of truth bending under pressure. "Miss Benton," the prosecutor continued, "would you say you're absolutely certain about any of your previous statements?" Kayla looked like she might cry. I guess I can't be completely sure now." Caroline tried to redirect, to bring Kayla back to the clear facts she'd stated earlier, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, taking root in the fertile soil of bias and fear. The judge, overseeing the hearing, frowned, lines deepening around his mouth. The prosecutor requested additional time to resolve these uncertainties, his words smooth as oil on water. When they left the courthouse, the morning sun felt colder somehow. Tasha kept her arm through her father's, protective as they walked to the car. Caroline promised to file more motions, to fight harder, but Marcus barely heard her words. Later that night, Marcus sat alone in his dark kitchen. The house creaked with familiar sounds, the furnace humming, ice maker dropping cubes, Tasha's soft footsteps upstairs. But he felt every year of his age, every weight of every battle he'd ever fought. His fingers traced the worn edges of his Bible, pages soft from years of seeking comfort between its covers. The darkness pressed against the windows like a living thing. "How do I keep standing when they keep pushing?" He whispered, his prayer falling into the quiet kitchen. The words held all his exhaustion, all his pain, all his struggle to hold on to dignity when the world seemed determined to strip it away. The kitchen clock ticked steadily onward, counting seconds that felt like stones, each one adding to the burden he carried. His question hung in the air, unanswered but not unheard, as another long night settled over Cedar Grove. The kitchen was silent, except for the soft scratch of Marcus's pen against paper. Dawn hadn't broken yet, and the only light came from a small lamp that cast warm shadows across the wooden table. His coffee had gone cold, barely touched, as he carefully wrote words he hoped his daughter would never need, but should always remember. "Never let anyone steal your dignity, even if they try to steal your name," he wrote, his usually steady hand trembling slightly. He folded the paper with care and slipped it into an envelope marked simply, "Tasha." The porch boards creaked under his feet as he stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of approaching autumn. Marcus closed his eyes, hands gripping the railing as he prayed, not for vengeance against Caldwell or the department, but for truth to break through like the sun that was just starting to paint the horizon pink. "Lord, protect my family," he whispered, "and help me stay steady when the ground keeps shaking." The morning quiet broke around 9, when urgent knocking echoed through the house. Marcus opened the door to find Dylan Marsh, a young man he'd helped through Veterans Court. Dylan's hands were shaking, his worn hoodie pulled tight like armor. "Judge Daniels, I'm sorry to just show up, but—" Dylan's words tumbled out in a rush. "Officer Bowers caught me outside the grocery store. Said if I speak up for you, my probation officer might start finding problems. Said maybe I should focus on staying out of trouble instead of—" He swallowed hard. Instead of supporting lies. Marcus felt the familiar burn of anger rise in his chest, but kept his voice gentle. "Come inside, son, let's handle this right." At the kitchen table, Marcus called Caroline while Dylan clutched a glass of water with trembling fingers. "We need to document this threat," Caroline said over speakerphone. "Dylan, I'm going to connect you with the public defender's office. They can help protect your rights. Just stay calm and write down everything that was said, exactly as you remember it." "Yes, ma'am," Dylan whispered. "I'm sorry, Judge, I want to help, but—" "You focus on taking care of yourself," Marcus assured him. "That's what matters most." After helping Dylan with the proper contacts and documentation, Marcus watched the young man walk away, shoulders hunched against invisible weight. The morning's peace felt distant now, replaced by a heaviness that settled in his bones. The afternoon brought Hal's steady presence to the door, his weathered face brightened by purpose. He spread papers across Marcus's kitchen table with the precision of a man who'd planned military operations. "Got 3 things," Hal said, laying out printed screenshots. "First, the gas station footage. Clear as day, shows the whole thing from across the street. You can see yourself showing ID, Caldwell getting aggressive, everything." He pointed to timestamps in the corner. "Matches the dispatch log down to the minute." Marcus leaned forward, studying the grainy but distinct images. There he was, standing calm while Caldwell invaded his space. The truth captured in silent frames. "Second," Halley continued, pulling out server logs marked with highlighting, "someone accessed the media storage room at 11:23 that night, right when the bodycam footage should have been uploading to the cloud server." His finger traced dates and times. The access card system doesn't lie. Caroline, who'd arrived moments after Hal, studied the logs intently. This isn't a technical glitch or delayed processing. Someone deliberately went in after hours and interfered with evidence. "Third thing," Hal said, his voice dropping lower, "I had a buddy in IT review these logs. The deletion attempts left traces. Amateur work, trying to cover tracks but not knowing how deep the system records go." Marcus sat back, letting the weight of it sink in. Not just an arrest born of prejudice, but a coordinated attempt to bury the truth. His hands folded together, steady now with certainty rather than resignation. Caroline pulled out her phone, determination hardening her features. She dialed Chief Porter's number, while Marcus and Hal watched in tense silence. "Chief Porter," Caroline said, her tone professional but firm, "we have proof of deletion and obstruction. Server logs, timestamps, everything. I thought you should know before we proceed formally." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that they could hear the soft static of an open line. Marcus watched Caroline's face, reading the subtle shift in her expression that told him Porter understood exactly what this meant. The wall of denial was about to crack. The afternoon sun slanted through dusty blinds in Chief Porter's back office as Marcus sat straight-backed in an old wooden chair, his hands folded quietly in his lap. Caroline stood beside him, while Hal Price spread documents across the desk with military precision. The retired Marine's weathered fingers tapped each piece of evidence like coordinates on a battle map. "Here's the gas station footage, clear as day," Hal said, his voice steady. "Shows the whole arrest from across the street. And these server logs. They tell quite a story." Chief Porter leaned forward, her reading glasses perched low on her nose. Her face tightened as she studied the timestamp printouts. "Someone accessed the media room at 11:47 that night," Caroline pointed out, "right when the body cam footage should have been uploading." The chief's shoulders dropped an inch. She reached for her phone and pressed a button. "Send Thompson from evidence up here. Now." The evidence tech arrived 3 minutes later, a thin man with nervous hands. When Porter showed him the logs, his face went pale. Officer Bowers asked for access," Thompson stammered. "Said he needed to check something for Officer Caldwell." Porter's jaw clenched. "Get Bowers immediately." The hallway confrontation was brief but decisive. Bowers, caught between his badge and the truth, cracked like thin ice. "Caldwell said we had to make the problem go away," he blurted, sweat beading on his forehead. "Said the judge was trying to destroy the department." "Write it down," Porter ordered. "Every word, every detail." She turned to her desk phone and punched in numbers with sharp jabs. "Dave, it's Porter. Stop everything on the Daniels case. We've got proof of evidence tampering." The door burst open. Caldwell filled the frame, his face flushed. "Chief, you can't—" "Not today." Porter's voice cut like steel. "Not one more word." Caroline stepped forward, her legal pad ready. "We need immediate dismissal of all charges and a formal correction for the record." "Agreed," Porter said. "If Officer Caldwell tells the full truth." "Internal Affairs," she continued, turning to Caldwell. "Report there. Now." Caldwell's face hardened as he backed out of the office, finally facing a wall he couldn't push through with force or lies. Marcus watched it all in silence, his expression calm but his heart pounding with the weight of truth, finally breaking free. The evidence tech huddled in a corner, scribbling his statement. Bowers sat at a desk nearby, head down, writing his own confession. Through the window, Marcus could see other officers gathering in small clusters, whispering as words spread through the station. Caroline touched Marcus's shoulder gently. "The truth is out now, no more hiding it." Chief Porter removed her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Judge Daniels, I know this doesn't fix what happened, but I promise you, we're going to clean house." Hal gathered the evidence carefully, making sure every page was accounted for. His military bearing hadn't wavered once during the confrontation. The office fell quiet, except for the scratch of pens on paper as statements were written, truth replacing lies, one word at a time. Through the open door, they heard Caldwell's heavy footsteps fade down the hall toward Internal Affairs, each step echoing with the sound of consequences, finally catching up. The church stood quiet in the gathering darkness, its stained glass windows dark except for one small office, where a lamp cast a warm glow. Inside, Marcus sat with his hands folded on the pastor's worn oak desk, waiting. Miss Evelyn's presence in the corner chair felt like a shield of grace, her silver hair catching the lamplight as she silently prayed. When Officer Ryan Caldwell stepped through the door, he looked smaller somehow. His uniform was crisp, but his shoulders had lost their swagger. The pastor gestured to an empty chair, then stepped back, creating space for truth to fill. "Sit down, Officer Caldwell," Marcus said softly. Caldwell's hands trembled as he lowered himself into the chair. The tick of the wall clock seemed to grow louder in the silence between them. Caldwell started, then stopped. He swallowed hard. "I saw you walking with that garment bag, and something in me just snapped." Marcus waited, his expression calm but intent. "I couldn't," Caldwell's voice cracked. "I couldn't accept that you were really a judge. Even when you showed me ID, even when you were so polite, I just couldn't let myself believe it." Tears gathered in Miss Evelyn's eyes as she watched, but she remained still and silent. "And then," Caldwell continued, his words tumbling out faster now. When everyone at the station knew who you were, I got scared. I was wrong, but I couldn't admit it. So I lied. I wrote that report saying you resisted, that you threatened me. I got Bowers to help hide the body cam footage. Marcus's hands tightened slightly, but his voice stayed steady. You didn't just arrest me, Officer Caldwell. You tried to destroy my reputation, my career. You made my daughter afraid in her own home. Caldwell bent forward, putting his face in his hands. I know. God help me, I know. The pastor shifted slightly, ready to intervene if needed, but Marcus raised a hand. Wait, look at me, Marcus said. Caldwell forced himself to meet Marcus's gaze. I've spent my life serving this country and this community, Marcus said. First in Desert Storm, then on the bench. Every day I work to make sure justice is served with wisdom and mercy. What you did wasn't just about me. It was about everything that badge and my robe are supposed to represent. Yes, sir, Caldwell whispered. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning you're going to tell the whole truth. Every detail, every lie, every person you involved. Not because I want revenge, but because the truth has to be on record so this doesn't happen to someone else. Caldwell nodded, wiping roughly at his eyes. I won't poison my soul to punish you, Marcus continued. That's not who I am. But there will be consequences and you're going to face them like a man. Miss Evelyn's quiet amen floated from the corner like a benediction. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Marcus stood in the courthouse square where he'd been arrested, but this time Tasha's hand was warm in his, and Caroline stood beside them with a supportive smile. Reporters gathered as Chief Porter approached the podium. She looked tired but determined, as she announced that Officer Caldwell had confessed to filing a false report and orchestrating a cover-up. The prosecutor was dropping all charges against Judge Daniels. A formal investigation would review every case where Caldwell's reports might have shown similar patterns. When reporters thrust microphones toward Marcus, asking how it felt to be vindicated, he simply said, "Truth prevails. That's all that matters." Across the street, through the station's glass doors, Marcus could see Caldwell being led into an interview room. The officer's face was drawn, but his step was steady, a man finally walking toward his actions instead of running from them. Tasha squeezed her father's hand. "You okay?" Marcus watched another officer close the interview room door. "Yes," he said quietly. "We all will be." The autumn morning brought crisp air and golden light to Cedar Grove's courthouse square. 2 weeks had passed since that night in the pastor's office, since truth finally broke through pride's walls. The town felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a fog had lifted. Marcus stood at his kitchen window, watching leaves dance across his front yard. The newspaper on his counter told the official story. Department announces reform package. Next to it lay a formal letter from the court, its language clear and firm. Judge Marcus Reed Daniels is hereby fully cleared of all allegations. Tasha came downstairs, already dressed for work. "You sure you're ready for today, Dad?" He nodded, adjusting his tie. "The veterans deserve their program, and I need to walk that square again, this time on my own terms." The phone rang. It was Dylan Marsh, his voice steady and clear. "Judge Daniels? Just wanted you to know, Hal's got me helping set up chairs at the VFW Hall. Says a man needs purpose." Marcus smiled. "That sounds exactly like Hal. How's the probation situation?" "Better now. Miss Caroline made sure everything's documented proper. No more special attention from anybody." Across town, Chief Porter stood before a room of officers, her voice firm as she outlined the new policies. Automatic body cam uploads, no exceptions. Outside audits twice yearly. And starting next month, we'll have civilian oversight on use of force reviews. She paused, letting that sink in. Judge Daniels has agreed to assist with our new training program. Some of you may not like these changes, but this isn't about comfort. It's about doing what's right. In the back row, Officer Bowers stared at his hands, remembering how easily he'd let fear push him into deleting evidence. The weight of that choice would stay with him. At the church, Miss Evelyn arranged flowers for Sunday while the pastor sorted through letters from other congregations. "People are watching how we heal," she said softly, "not just how we hurt." The pastor nodded. "Did you hear about Caldwell?" "Internal affairs finished yesterday. He's done with the force, but he's cooperating now. telling the whole truth about patterns we needed to see. By mid-morning, people began gathering at the courthouse. The veterans' program, delayed but not defeated, was finally happening. Flags rippled in the breeze. Hal had positioned chairs just so, making sure every veteran could sit with dignity. Marcus walked toward the square, but this time he wasn't alone. Miss Evelyn fell into step beside him, then Tasha, then others, courthouse staff, church members, ordinary citizens who'd chosen truth over comfort. They moved together past the spot where handcuffs had clicked, past the shadow of humiliation, toward something stronger. Inside, Marcus changed into his judicial robe. The fabric felt right against his shoulders, not as a symbol of power, but as a reminder of service. When he emerged, the room stood, not from protocol, but from respect. His words were simple and clear. We gather today to honor service and sacrifice, but we also stand as witnesses to a deeper truth, that justice requires both courage and compassion. That change is possible when we face our failures honestly, and that dignity, real dignity, isn't about status or uniform or robe. It's about how we treat each other's humanity. The veterans' ceremony proceeded with quiet power. Young Marines helped older soldiers to their seats. A woman in an Air Force jacket signed for her deaf grandson. Dylan, wearing a fresh haircut and borrowed tie, helped Hal hand out programs. Afterward, in the Ito courthouse hallway, Caroline touched Marcus's arm. The Citizen Review Panel starts next month. They want you to help structure it. Not to lead it, he said firmly, but to help it serve everyone fairly? Yes. That evening, the church basement filled with the warm sense of a community potluck. Children darted between tables. Elderly deacons swapped stories. New faces mixed with familiar ones. Marcus watched Miss Evelyn teach Tasha her secret cornbread recipe, saw Dylan deep in conversation with Hal about the VFW's food bank program. The fear that had gripped the town was melting. Not into forgetfulness, they would remember these lessons, but into something wiser, something hopeful. Marcus stood quietly beside the punch bowl, his heart full. The pastor's wife asked how he was feeling. Justice is strongest when it has courage, he said softly, watching his community heal. And when it has mercy,